The village slept under a blanket of stars, the air thick with heat and secrets, the kind that stirred only when the world was quiet and the lamps had gone out. She stood at the edge of her courtyard, her dupatta barely clinging to her shoulder, her skin glowing under the silver moonlight, and her breath shallow, with something more than just anticipation. She heard the soft rustle of leaves, the creak of the gate, the subtle scrape of sandals on dry earth, and her heart pounded like the drums of the harvest festival. He came out of the shadows tall and broad, his eyes devouring her like he had not seen her just this morning. Near the well, she had smiled, then a soft half-smile that promised nothing and everything. And now, here they were, again, both pulled by a force that made no sense in the daylight. He stood close enough for her to feel the heat rolling off his chest. His hand brushed her waist as if by accident, but lingered like he was claiming what he believed was his. She tilted, her head slightly exposing her neck, her eyes fluttering closed as his breath kissed her skin, and she knew this was wrong. The world would never forgive a wife, a beauty who belonged to another, who now trembled for a man whose window faced hers. Across the narrow lane, he touched her cheek, then her jaw, his fingers bold and unafraid, like he had memorized her every curve in his dreams, and now sought to trace them in flesh. His lips hovered over hers, but did not touch, and it drove her mad. She leaned forward, unable to resist, and when their mouths finally met, it was not soft or hesitant. It was a clash of need of hunger, bottled up over months of quiet glances, of chance touches, of whispered hellos that meant more than they should. Her fingers tangled in his hair. His hands slid down her back, drawing her closer until their bodies pressed together, like they had done this before, like their shadows had danced in secret, long before their bodies ever did. And when they finally broke apart, the night was no longer still. It was alive. It was loud with the sound of their breathing, with the tremble in her legs, and the fire in his eyes. And as he led her inside, not her house, not his, just a place they both knew was hidden, they crossed a line that had long ago blurred in their hearts. Morning never truly reached the corners where their bodies had tangled, where her bangles lay forgotten on a dusty rug, and his shirt hung from a broken hook in the wall. The sun rose, but it dared not peek through the crack in the wooden window, because what had passed in the night was sacred, was sinful, was both all at once. She stirred against him, her hair a dark cascade over his chest, her lips swollen from his kisses, and her thigh draped over his like it had always belonged there. He watched her like she was art, like she was his, even if only for the hours when the world turned its back. Her voice broke the silence soft and guilty, but he silenced it with a kiss that said, "I know that said, I want that said, say nothing more," and she obeyed, because words would ruin it, words would make it real, and she was not ready for real. She was only ready for him. Her fingers danced across his skin, tracing the line of his jaw, the slope of his neck, the dip of his waist, as if trying to memorize the man she could never truly have. And he responded with fire, with fingers that gripped her hips and pulled her onto him again, like the night had not sated him, like the sight of her bare skin lit something feral in him. They moved like water, like heat, like something ancient and forbidden. Their gasps, the only prayers they offered to the gods they had betrayed. And afterward, they lay tangled, not speaking, not thinking, because the moment they did, the world would flood in and drown them both. She rose slowly, wrapped in a thin cotton sheet, her hair wild, her eyes filled with something dangerous, something real. She looked at him one last time, and he knew this was not the end. That tonight, when the lamps went out and the village fell asleep again, she would return, not because she should, but because she had to. because the whispers in the dark were louder than the voices of duty, than the silence of her marriage, than the rules written by men who had never burned like this. And as she slipped through the back door into the dusty morning light, he smiled not with joy, but with ache, because loving her in the shadows had become the only truth he ever believed in.